The envelope was thick, glossy, and still unopened. It sat in the center of the kitchen counter like a ghost of better intentions. 2 plane tickets and a printed itinerary that I'd planned weeks ago. Round trip to Charleston. A boutique hotel with a harbor view. A dinner reservation at Husk, where the sommelier remembered our names from our first anniversary. That had to mean something. It was supposed to be our reset. Our last attempt at rediscovering what had slowly slipped through our fingers. When I booked it all, I still believed in us. Not blindly, not stupidly, but deliberately. Like a man repairing a cracked foundation, one careful layer at a time. I picked Charleston because that's where she smiled the most the last time we were there. I chose the dates to align with our anniversary. And I picked the hotel room with the double balcony because I remembered how she once stood out there in just my shirt, wind in her hair, glass of wine in her hand, and whispered, "I feel like myself here." So when she walked into the kitchen 2 days before the trip, dressed in soft gray sweats and her hair up in a way that used to mean lazy day, I expected anything but what came next. "I don't think this is the right time," she said. Just like that. No build-up. No warning. She said it with a softness that tried to mask the blade beneath her words. I stared at her, blinking once, then again, thinking maybe I missed something. Maybe she was talking about the dishwasher or the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. But her eyes didn't move toward either. "The trip," she added, as if I hadn't figured it out yet. I need space." There was no anger in her voice. No coldness, either. That would have been easier. That I could fight against. But this was like being left behind in the middle of an open field, watching someone you love drift away slowly, and knowing no amount of running would bring them back. "I thought this was our space," I said, nodding toward the envelope. "This trip, it was for us." She bit her lip like she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, and rinsed out her mug. It was the one I gave her on our 5th anniversary. It said, "Still my favorite hello." The irony wasn't lost on me. "I know what you're trying to do," she said, keeping her back to me. "And it's sweet. Really. But I can't go on a trip just to pretend we're okay for a weekend. It doesn't fix anything." I felt something crack inside my chest, quietly, invisibly. Not an explosion, just a shift. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the mug against the wall or beg her to reconsider. I stood there, numb, staring at the spot where the sunlight hit the counter, warming the envelope, as if it could burn the truth right out of it. "So that's it?" I asked. "You need space. But not from work. Not from your friends. Just from me." She finally turned around then, and to her credit, she didn't flinch. "It's not rejection," she said. "I'm not walking away." But she already had. I could feel it. She was 10 feet away, but her absence hit like a vacuum. The air between us felt thinner. My lungs worked harder to pretend they were fine. "I just don't think this trip is the answer," she said. "And I don't want you to waste it." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because anything I said would have been a plea, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't beg for love that wasn't freely given. So I nodded. She left the room, and the envelope stayed. It's been 2 days, and it's still there, centered on the counter like it's waiting to be chosen. Like the future might still change if I just reach out and open it. But I don't. Instead, I make coffee in the quiet. Her mug is still in the sink. I don't wash it. The kitchen feels larger now. Not in square footage, but in silence. I don't know what time she came home last night, or if she even did. I didn't ask. I slept in the guest room. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't bear lying next to someone who didn't want to be close anymore. The hardest part isn't the distance, it's the familiarity. The way she still folds her sweater neatly over the chair. The way her perfume lingers in the hallway. The way her hairbrush is still next to mine, as if sharing space means sharing a life. The day we said, "I do," she cried during the vows. Said she'd never believed in forever until she met me. Now I can't remember the last time she cried for anything we shared. There's a calendar on the wall by the fridge. The anniversary is circled in red, thick and bright, like it was written by someone who truly believed it would still matter. It's tomorrow, but the tickets remain untouched. She didn't say she wouldn't come back. She just said not now. But sometimes, not now is just a softer way of saying never again. And sometimes, the most painful part of love isn't when it ends. It's when it fades, silently, like ink disappearing from a date on the calendar. I didn't answer the phone the first time it rang. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the tickets again, one hand wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee I'd reheated twice and never drank. The screen lit up across the counter. Emily, sister. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't have the energy to explain anything. Not yet. Not to her. But she called again 10 minutes later. Then again. By the third call, I figured something was wrong. Something worse than what was already wrong. Hey, I said, voice dry. What the hell happened? No hello. No easing into it. That was Emily, blunt, sharp, efficient. A nurse by profession, a fixer by personality. She'd always been the one to patch scraped knees and cracked hearts. I take it Dana said something. I muttered, rubbing my eyes. She texted me. Trip's canceled. We need space. That's it. She paused. You okay? I gave a humorless laugh. Not really. She exhaled on the other end, like she was trying to hold back whatever rush of emotion wanted to come out. You were planning this trip for weeks, weren't you? More like months. She really said she needed space? That's the line now? Yeah, I said, my eyes drifting again to the envelope. It's not rejection, apparently. Just timing. Emily went quiet, but I could hear her breathing. Jesus, she said finally. You've been trying. You've been the only one trying. I didn't respond. I couldn't argue with her. She was right. I'd carried the weight of us for so long it had reshaped my posture, the way I breathed, the way I hoped. I'd come to believe that if I just stayed steady, just gave her enough time, she'd come back to the version of herself that used to reach for my hand in crowded rooms. I'm sorry, Emily said, softer this time. Really? But listen, that trip? Yeah. You should still go. I scoffed. You serious? Dead serious. To Charleston? Alone? You were going to spend all that money to try to save something. Now maybe you should spend it to save yourself a little. That's dramatic, I muttered. No, it's not. You need a reset. Even if you don't want to call it that. Get out of your head. Get out of this damn kitchen. Go sit on a beach or drink alone in that fancy restaurant if you have to. But go. I leaned back in the chair, staring up at the ceiling like it held some answer I couldn't reach. It'll look pathetic. Not as pathetic as sitting around while your wife needs space. She made a choice, Jack. She stepped away. You're just standing still. Are you really giving me some eat, pray, love lecture right now? I'm giving you a go before you rot from the inside out lecture. I know you, Jack. You're loyal to a fault. You'd sit in this damn house until the walls closed in on you if someone told you it meant being a good husband. But at what cost? The silence that followed hit harder than I expected. Because she was right. I'd been loyal, steady, predictable, but that hadn't kept her from drifting. I rubbed my jaw, feeling the stubble I hadn't bothered to shave since Tuesday. I don't know, I said finally. Feels sad. It is sad, she said. But staying home and torturing yourself isn't noble. It's just pain on repeat. At least if you go, you'll feel something different. You want me to go find a one-night stand or something? Emily snorted. Jesus, no. I want you to get some sunlight. Maybe remember who you are when you're not waiting for someone else to remember you. The call went quiet for a few seconds. Then, or, she added, voice changing slightly, you could take me. I blinked. You? Yummy. Why not? I've got PTO, I haven't been south in 2 years, and God knows I could use a break from fluorescent lights and adult diapers. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. You want to crash my sad, abandoned anniversary trip? Damn right I do. I don't think the hotel reservation includes emergency sister therapy. Well, you'll just have to sneak me in through the back door like the scandalous mistress I am. Another laugh. This one lighter. It was absurd. It would look weird. People would talk if they knew. But so what? Dana had already walked away, or something close to it. She hadn't asked for my loyalty when she left the tickets on the counter. She hadn't asked anything. And maybe, just maybe, Emily was right. I didn't need to do something romantic anymore. I needed to do something different. All right, I said quietly. Let me call the airline. No need, she said, already typing furiously in the background. Send me the itinerary. I'll book my own seat. Same flight. Let's go mess up some hotel's notion of a honeymoon suite. I hesitated. You sure? I'm sure you need someone who won't let you stare at the ocean and wallow. I'm great at annoying people out of their misery. You always were. I sent her the itinerary 5 minutes later. And 15 minutes after that, I stood in front of the kitchen counter, looking down at the envelope again. This time, I opened it. The tickets still had our names. Mine and Dana's. A matched pair. But tomorrow, that second seat was going to someone else. Someone who actually showed up. I left the envelope where it was. Open, finally, like a wound that had stopped pretending it wasn't there. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the smallest pull of something unfamiliar. Relief. We didn't say much for the first hour. The road stretched out in front of us, flat and forgettable, the highway signs ticking past like second thoughts. I kept the music low, just enough to cover the silence without pretending it wasn't there. Emily had kicked her shoes off 15 minutes in and curled her feet beneath her, balancing a coffee between her knees like it was her anchor to reality. Every once in a while, I'd glance over. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trying to force conversation, either. Just looking out the window, brow furrowed slightly, lips drawn into a quiet line. It occurred to me then that this wasn't easy for her, either. She hadn't just volunteered for a beachside vacation. She'd signed up to walk through the ruins of her brother's marriage, sit beside him in a hotel room meant for someone else, clink glasses over a dinner that was supposed to be for two people in love. I still can't believe she said no, Emily murmured, breaking the silence as we passed a gas station off Route 17. Not even to the trip, just to trying. I kept my eyes on the road. She framed it like it wasn't a no. Yeah, not the right time. Emily scoffed. That's just breakup code with extra padding. I didn't answer, mostly because I didn't know what I'd say without sounding bitter. And God knows I'd been trying to hold the bitterness at bay, keep it from seeping into every thought like mold. She didn't used to be like this, I said eventually, my voice low. You remember how she used to be, right? Emily nodded. Yeah, she was funny. And loud. You couldn't get her to shut up during board games. A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. She used to narrate every turn. Drove me crazy. She used to look at you, Emily said, a little more gently. Like you were the only person in the room, even if we were all there. I felt that like a bruise under the skin. Not pain exactly, but the memory of it. People change, I said. Yeah, she said quietly. But the good ones don't let go without fighting. We hit a stretch of silence again. Not awkward, just heavy. Honest. I adjusted my grip on the wheel and looked sideways. She had her sunglasses on now, the reflection of the trees flashing across the lenses. Her hair was pulled back in a quick ponytail, and she wore a faded hoodie over a tank top. For a second, I was struck by how different she was from Dana. Not just in looks, but in presence. Dana had always held herself like someone on camera, postured, composed, curated. Emily, on the other hand, had no off switch. What she felt, she showed. What she thought, she said. Sitting next to her felt like being in the sun after a long stretch of gray. We stopped for gas somewhere outside Savannah. She got out and wandered into the mini-mart while I filled the tank. I caught myself watching her as she moved, barefoot in flip-flops now, one hand lazily grazing the edge of a magazine rack, the other pulling a bottle of water from the cooler. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She never did, and that hit me harder than I expected. When she got back to the car, she tossed me a bag of chips without looking. For the road, she said. Figured you'd skip lunch and pretend you weren't hungry. I smiled as I opened the bag. You always did think I was predictable. You are, she said, grinning. But in a good way. Like, coffee at 7, radio tuned to the same channel since 2009, always wears a watch even though his phone tells time. I lifted my wrist and glanced at the old black leather watch I'd worn for years. I like knowing where I am. Yeah, well, she said, settling back in her seat. That's why you're the one worth showing up for. It took me a second to respond. That one sentence lodged itself somewhere in my chest, stuck between gratitude and grief. I didn't say thank you. I just started the engine and pulled back onto the road. As the miles passed, the silence began to shift. It wasn't weighted anymore. It was familiar, comfortable, like driving with someone who knows when to speak and when to just be. Emily cracked the window and propped her elbow up on the door. I noticed the tan line on her arm from her watch. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. Maybe because it meant she lived her life outside of curated moments. Maybe because it made her feel real in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We started talking again somewhere near Beaufort. Nothing deep, just shared stories. Her job, my projects. Remembering childhood road trips with our dad's old station wagon and the AC that only worked on one side. She told a story about her last relationship, Some guy who claimed to love independent women until she proved she didn't need him for everything. I laughed so hard I almost swerved into the shoulder. By the time the Charleston skyline came into view, the sun was beginning its slow descent into orange. And somewhere between the crooked oak trees and the first glimpse of harbor water, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit. This drive? It already felt lighter than the last year of my marriage. And Emily, sitting there beside me, head tilted toward the breeze, singing softly along with the radio. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the only person who hadn't drifted. The hotel lobby was a wall of cool air and polished silence, the kind of place where people spoke in lowered voices and the scent of lemon oil and linen hung thick in the air. Emily wheeled both suitcases up beside me, brushing her hair behind her ear as she glanced around. "Nice," she said, in that half-impressed, half-suspicious tone she used when something looked too perfect. I looked around, nodding. The concierge stood behind a sleek marble counter, perfectly still except for the movement of his hands across the keyboard. The lighting was low, gold, soft. Romantic, if you were in the mood for that sort of thing. Which I wasn't. At least that's what I told myself. "Reservation under Whitaker," I said when we reached the counter. He tapped a few keys. "Yes, sir. One moment." His brow furrowed. It appears there's been a change. Due to a system error and an overbooking, we're unable to offer the standard double-occupancy king room." I sighed, shoulders tightening. "Okay, so what are the options?" "Well," the man gave a practiced apologetic smile. "We've upgraded you to one of our executive suites. It's the only available room for the duration of your stay." He turned the screen toward me. One suite, 2 queen beds, 1 bath. Not what I had booked. Not what I wanted. But the town was busy, and my emotional bandwidth for arguing over hotel software was at an all-time low. "That okay?" I asked, glancing at Emily. She leaned her elbows on the counter. "As long as you don't snore like a chainsaw, I can survive a few nights." The concierge's smile twitched at the corners. 2 key cards, he offered. "Yes," I said, reaching for my wallet. Emily leaned in. "You paying for both?" "Technically," I muttered, swiping my card. "I'm paying for what was supposed to be a marriage-saving weekend." She didn't say anything for a beat. Then, guess that suite's seeing something closer to sibling therapy than steamy reconciliation. We rode the elevator in silence. The kind that stretched just a little longer than it needed to. I tried not to think about how the room was meant for 2 people trying to fall back in love. I tried not to think about what I'd imagined when I booked it. Dana laughing as she threw herself onto the bed, her heels falling to the floor, her eyes soft again. Instead, I looked at Emily in the gold light of the elevator, her arms crossed, her reflection multiplied by mirrored walls. She didn't look uncomfortable, but I did. The suite was beautiful, of course. Charleston charm with modern polish, exposed brick, driftwood tones, tall windows with views of the harbor. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in a bucket near the window with a note I'd written 3 weeks ago, scheduled through the concierge. "To us, happy 11 years." Emily saw it before I could move it. "Oh," she said softly. I grabbed the card before she could read it, tossed it into the trash like it burned. "Sorry," I muttered. Didn't think they'd still deliver that. She didn't say anything, just walked over to the windows and looked out, arms folded across her chest. We both knew this was only supposed to be one night. The hotel promised they'd move us tomorrow when a standard room became available. Just a temporary glitch. Still, the awkwardness hung between us, quieter than tension but louder than comfort. The beds were separated by a wide space, with a long dresser in between. Separate enough. But the single bathroom felt suddenly intimate in a way I hadn't anticipated. We each claimed a bed. We didn't say it, but we both changed clothes with our backs turned, like kids at summer camp. I kept my undershirt on. She disappeared into the bathroom for longer than necessary, emerging in cotton shorts and a hoodie, hair damp from a quick rinse. "You good with the temperature?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just tired." I clicked off the lamp between us. We lay there in the dark for a while, side by side, but miles apart. Through the sliver of moonlight cutting across the ceiling, I could see the shape of her curled beneath the covers, her breathing soft and steady. My own breath felt heavier, less cooperative. It was past midnight when I gave up trying to sleep. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. The shadows there made patterns I used to trace on Dana's skin when we'd lie together like this, her head on my chest, her fingers absent-mindedly running along my ribs. I used to think those quiet moments were what love really was. Not the grand gestures, just the presence, the safety. Now the silence felt different. Not safe, not full, empty. I closed my eyes, trying to count the spaces between Emily's breaths. It was calming and maddening at once, and strangely intimate. I'd shared hotel rooms with her before, family trips, birthdays, even a spontaneous Vegas weekend when she needed to reset. But that was before my marriage cracked apart, before I was this version of myself, slightly hollowed out, unsure where to stand. Still, her presence kept the ache from becoming unbearable. I wondered if she was awake too, if she felt it too, that strange, weightless tension. Not romantic, not forbidden, just human, just proximity. I shifted onto my side, facing the window, and caught the faint glow of the digital clock. 12:01 a.m. Our anniversary had officially arrived, and I was lying in a hotel bed next to the only person who hadn't left me. Not in the way that mattered. The table for two waited in the corner of the courtyard, beneath a lattice of string lights swaying in the soft Charleston breeze. The maitre d' smiled politely as he led me to it, unaware that I was carrying the weight of what should have been. "Your reservation, Mr. Whitaker," he said, pulling out the chair opposite me. I nodded my thanks and sat down, trying to ignore the stares I imagined from nearby couples. They were dressed in light linens, sipping from wine glasses, leaning in close, laughing easily. I kept my eyes down and let the menu fill the space where Dana should have been. I'd almost canceled the reservation that morning. The idea of sitting here alone, on our anniversary, surrounded by everything we'd meant to share. It felt masochistic. But then I'd remembered what Emily said during the drive. "You've been standing still," she told me. "At least if you go, you'll feel something different." So I went. I wore the jacket Dana once said made me look dangerously handsome, though now it felt like a costume. The server arrived with a smile, not bothering to ask if I was waiting for someone. That was almost worse. He probably saw the empty chair and filed me under the silent column marked Abandoned Anniversary. I ordered a glass of Cabernet I didn't want and the ribeye she would have ordered for me anyway. Dana always said it brought out my animal side. I smiled bitterly at the thought. These days, I felt more like a ghost. Halfway through the wine, I started to relax. Not because it tasted good, it didn't, but because the silence was starting to feel less pointed. The table across from me clinked their glasses in a toast. Another laughed loudly about something involving a dog and a thunderstorm. I leaned back and let the breeze graze the back of my neck. And then I saw her. Emily. She was walking toward the table, already halfway through the courtyard before I realized it was her. Her hair was down, catching the golden light like it had been waiting for it. She wore a navy dress, simple and soft, and not what she'd packed. I blinked, confused. She slid into the chair across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Figured you shouldn't be alone tonight," she said. I stared at her, stunned. "How'd you know where I was?" "You talk in your sleep," she said with a half-smile. "You said courtyard and 8 p.m. clear as day last night." I raised a brow. "I don't talk in my sleep." "Apparently. You do when you're emotionally repressed." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A short, genuine burst that caught me off guard. She grinned. "There it is." I looked at her again, really looked this time. She wasn't trying to dress up. She wasn't making a statement. She was just here, present. "What about your plans?" I asked. She shrugged. "I didn't have any. I figured I'd give you space, but then I thought about you sitting here alone, and it didn't sit right with me." I shook my head, still in disbelief. "You shouldn't be rescuing me from my own anniversary dinner." "Why not?" she asked. "Somebody should be here with you tonight." The way she said it, low, simple, certain, hit harder than I expected. No pity, no agenda, just care. The waiter returned with a bit more surprise in his eyes this time. He recovered quickly and smiled as Emily requested a glass of white and scanned the menu like she belonged. We didn't toast. We didn't say the date out loud. But somewhere between the wine and the appetizers, the mood shifted. The awkwardness fell away. Emily told stories from the hospital, outrageous patients, rookie nurses, the doctor who tried to flirt mid-surgery. I found myself laughing again. Real, open laughs. And not just at the stories, but at the way she told them. hands moving, eyes dancing, like she was performing just for me. You always do that, I said after she finished a particularly absurd story. Do what? Come in when I'm wrecked and act like I'm not. She smiled, tilting her head. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's just, you've always done that. Even when we were kids. I figured you had enough people who saw your worst. I wanted to be the one who saw your best, even when you forgot it was still there. That quieted me. We finished the meal slowly, neither of us rushing. By the time dessert came, something chocolate she insisted we share, the restaurant had thinned out. The string lights above cast a soft golden haze across the table. The breeze had cooled. I looked across the table at her, lips glossy from the last bite of cake, eyes watching mine. What? She asked. I shook my head. Just thanks. For showing up. She raised her glass. To showing up. I touched mine to hers, the soft clink hanging in the air like something sacred. It wasn't the anniversary I planned, but it was the first time in months I felt like myself. And as we sat there, the last flicker of day fading into night, I realized something simple and profound. Maybe what matters most isn't who you plan your life with. It's who pulls up a chair when the plans fall apart. The hallway back to the room was hushed, the carpet swallowing our footsteps, the kind of silence that made you aware of every breath. Emily walked ahead of me, her bare shoulders catching the soft light from the wall sconces, her hand toying with the strap of her clutch. Neither of us had said much since dinner. We'd lingered at the table until the waiter politely dropped the check and began resetting nearby chairs. And even then, we walked slowly back to the hotel, through cobblestone side streets and sleepy storefronts, the kind of southern quiet that made even heartache feel gentler. Now it was nearly midnight. When she opened the suite door and stepped inside, I followed her in and instinctively reached for the switch. The overhead lights flicked on, but they felt too harsh, too much. Emily winced and immediately dimmed them with the wall dial until only the low bedside lamps glowed. That's better, she said, setting her bag down on the dresser. I nodded, loosening the collar of my shirt and shrugging off the jacket. It smelled faintly of salt air and cologne I didn't wear for anyone anymore. You want another drink? I asked, half out of habit, half as a way to not say what I was really thinking. She glanced toward the small bar by the window, where the untouched bottle of champagne still waited in its bucket, condensation running down the sides. I'd say that bottles waited long enough, she said. I smiled, walking over and untwisting the foil. With a soft pop, the cork came free, not with celebration, but something quieter, like a breath let out at the end of a long day. I poured 2 glasses and handed her one. To what? I asked, lifting mine. She considered that for a beat, eyes scanning the ceiling like the answer might be hiding in the crown molding. To not letting the night go to waste, she said softly. We clinked glasses. The champagne was dry, crisp, not the kind you drink for taste, but for tradition. We drank anyway. Emily moved toward the window and sat on the cushioned bench, curling one leg beneath her. I took the chair near the bed, still in my dress shirt, sleeves rolled halfway, the top button undone. For a few minutes, we sat in companionable quiet, sipping, letting the evening breathe. And then she spoke. I used to envy your marriage, she said, voice light, but not casual. I mean, before things got bad. I looked over. Why? She shrugged. You made it look solid. Like, 2 people who knew how to orbit each other without crashing, even in the small stuff. She'd pour your coffee before her own. You'd carry her bag without her asking. It was the kind of ease that most couples fake, but it always looked real with you too. I stared down into my glass, the bubbles still rising. It was real, I said, until it wasn't. Emily swirled her drink slowly. What happened? I let out a long breath. I think she got tired of being in something steady when the world kept telling her she was meant for more. Emily looked at me, head tilted. You think she left you because you made life too safe? I laughed softly, bitterly. I think she started mistaking safety for boredom. That's not on you, Jack. Maybe not, I said, but it still feels like I failed. Like I kept showing up for something that slowly stopped including me. She didn't argue. She didn't offer a silver lining or a gentle reframe. She just let it land. And that made me trust her even more. I get that, she said finally. I stayed too long with someone who made me feel invisible. And the worst part? It wasn't the nights he didn't call. It wasn't the silence after fights. It was when I realized I could disappear and he'd sleep just fine. I looked up, surprised by the sharp honesty in her voice. "You never told me that," I said. "I didn't want to make it real," she answered. Saying it out loud always felt like admitting I failed too. There was a stillness after that. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. I stood and walked to the window, the city lights painting a soft shimmer across the water. She joined me, standing close. Close enough that I could feel the warmth from her skin. We watched in silence, our reflections faint in the glass. "You're not invisible," I said, voice low. I felt her head turn slightly, though I didn't meet her eyes. "And you didn't fail," she whispered. Her shoulder brushed mine, barely a touch, but enough to make my skin aware of itself. The silence stretched again, longer this time. But neither of us moved away. She broke it first. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "how many of our best moments we miss because we're clinging so hard to the broken ones?" I turned to face her then. She was so close. Too close. Not enough. "I think about that all the time," I said. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I was ready to give. And yet, I didn't look away. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't the romantic kind. Not yet. It was rawer than that. Needful. The kind of tension born of being seen when you've spent too long pretending you were fine. I reached up, just slightly, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. My hand lingered for a second too long. She didn't move. Didn't flinch. But she didn't lean in either. Eventually, she stepped back, just an inch. Just enough to breathe. "We should sleep," she said. I nodded. She turned away and disappeared into the bathroom, leaving the door slightly ajar behind her. I stood there at the window, heart drumming low and quiet, staring at the reflection of a man who wasn't as lost as he was the day before. And that scared me more than anything else. The room was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't settle. It hovers. It's the absence of everything unspoken, but still felt. Emily hadn't said much after coming out of the bathroom. She pattered across the room in silence, brushing her teeth with her hair twisted into a loose knot, wearing a pair of soft cotton shorts and a long t-shirt that hit her mid-thigh. Comfortable. Not careful. But maybe that was the problem. It was getting harder to pretend there wasn't something shifting between us. She climbed into her bed without a word, pulling the covers up and turning off her lamp, leaving only the dim glow of mine near the door. I did the same, lying back in my own bed, hands behind my head, eyes locked on the ceiling. We weren't touching. We weren't even looking at each other. But the energy between our two beds was unmistakable. Something had changed after the conversation at the window. Something real. I could still feel the ghost of her presence beside me. The warmth of her shoulder against mine. The way her eyes had searched mine like they weren't looking for permission. They were looking for truth. And I hadn't backed away. That was the part that kept replaying in my mind. I'd wanted to touch her again. And not by accident. The realization sent a quiet jolt through me. This was Emily. My sister-in-law. My wife's sister. The person who'd known me through every version of my life. Before Dana, during Dana, and now this slow death after Dana. She'd seen me in tuxedos and hangovers, in victories and defeats. And right now, I didn't know if I was seeing her the same way anymore. "I'm not sleeping either," she said, voice low from across the dark. I turned toward her voice. Her bed was just far enough away to keep us honest. "Yeah," I said. "Figured." She rolled over to face me. I could just barely make out the curve of her cheek in the soft light, the way her hair had fallen out of the bun and framed her face. "This feels weird," she said. I didn't pretend not to understand. "It does. But not in the wrong way," she added. That caught me off guard. I swallowed. "No, not wrong. Just complicated." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I keep thinking about how many times I used to imagine you and Dana as the example. Like if I could just find something half as solid, I'd be okay." "We weren't always solid," I said. "I know that now. But that doesn't mean it wasn't real." That landed somewhere deep. Because she was right. It had been real. Just not anymore. I shifted onto my side to face her fully. "Do you think we're doing something wrong?" I asked. Her eyes flickered in the dark. "By what? Talking? Feeling something?" "I don't know. Maybe." She let out a breath, slow and measured. "I think the only wrong thing would be pretending we don't feel it." I stared at her, heartbeat thudding low and steady. "And what is it exactly?" I asked. She hesitated. Not because she didn't know, but because she did. It's knowing you're not just my brother-in-law anymore, she said finally. Not in here. She pointed to her chest, a soft motion beneath the blankets. I don't see you as Dana's anymore. And maybe I haven't for a while. The air felt heavy with that truth. Not shameful, just real. I sat up slightly, running a hand through my hair, letting the silence press in. I keep asking myself if I'm just drawn to you because I feel empty, I admitted. Because you showed up when she didn't. Maybe, she said. But maybe it's because I see you. Not the version Dana edited to fit her life, but the real you. I turned to face her again, heart in my throat. I almost kissed you last night. She didn't blink. I know. You didn't stop me. I wasn't going to. That admission hung between us like heat rising off pavement. I stood, crossing the room slowly, unsure if I was walking toward a mistake or a truth I'd been too afraid to say out loud. She didn't move when I reached her bed. She looked up at me, unflinching. And still, I didn't move closer. I just stood there, the space between us charged and alive. I can't, I said. She nodded. I know. Not because I don't want to, but because, if we cross that line now, it's not because we're ready. It's because we're lonely. I get it. I stepped back, sat on the edge of my own bed again, breathing deeper than I needed to. You're not a rebound, I said. You deserve more than being my aftermath. She didn't speak, but her eyes never left mine. I don't want to wake up tomorrow regretting how I handled tonight. That made her smile, barely. A trace of something kind behind the hurt. You're doing the right thing, she said. Even if it sucks. We lay back down in our separate beds. This time, the silence was heavier, but also somehow cleaner. Like we'd carved something sacred out of restraint. We didn't sleep for a long time, but we didn't cross the line either. And in some strange, painful way, that might have been the most intimate thing we could have done. I woke to the sound of seagulls and sunlight pouring through the cracks in the blinds. For a moment, I didn't move. I just laid there, still half in the haze of sleep, trying to remember where I was, what time it was, who was next to me. But of course, there was no who next to me. Just the gentle hum of the ceiling fan, the rustle of sheets as I turned onto my side, and the faint scent of sea salt and warm linen in the air. And then, her voice. Coffee's on. Emily stood near the kitchenette, barefoot in the same t-shirt she'd worn to bed, hair a little wild, but somehow perfect in its own way. She held a mug in both hands, steam curling toward her face as she leaned against the counter. I sat up, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and took stock of how I felt. Clear. Not ashamed. Not confused. Not even that weird emotional hangover that comes after sharing too much with someone you're not supposed to. Just steady. Did you sleep? I asked. She nodded. Eventually. Me too. No awkwardness. No avoidance. We had hovered over something last night. Something raw and human and maybe more honest than either of us had been in months. But we hadn't crossed it. And somehow, that restraint didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like respect. She poured a second mug and walked it over to me. Here, she said. You're grumpy without caffeine. I took it with a smirk. You're grumpy with caffeine. She laughed, and something about the sound settled the last pieces of the morning into place. We drank in silence, side by side. Her sitting on the bench near the window, me still half wrapped in sheets, back against the headboard. The city outside was just waking up. Distant horns, the low thrum of foot traffic, a breeze pushing against the old windows like a reminder to go out and live again. What do you want to do today? She asked eventually. I shrugged. Hadn't thought that far. Well, she said, setting her mug down, I was thinking beach. Not really a beach guy. You don't have to be a beach guy. You just have to be a sunlight on your face, toes in the sand, pretend nothing else matters for a few hours guy. I looked at her, eyebrows raised. Is that what you tell all your emotionally exhausted travel companions? No, she said, grinning. Just the ones who look like they haven't had fun since Obama was in office. I laughed into my mug. Fine. Beach it is. We dressed quickly, casual, no fuss. She wore cut-off denim shorts and a pale yellow top that made her look annoyingly radiant. I threw on a navy shirt, old and worn, the one Dana used to say was too lived in to wear out. I wore it anyway. The walk to the beach was easy, 15 minutes of palm-shaded sidewalks and low conversation. We talked about stupid things. The heat, the price of bottled water, that one neighbor back home who still mowed his lawn in dress pants. But underneath it all was a rhythm, a comfort. We weren't trying to fill the silence. We were just moving in it together. At the beach, she laid out a towel and kicked off her sandals with that same unapologetic ease she carried everywhere. I hesitated a moment, feeling weirdly exposed in my own skin, like I wasn't sure how to be in this kind of day. But she looked back at me, smiled, and said, "Don't overthink it." So I didn't. We sat side by side, waves crashing in their own lazy tempo, the warmth of the sun sinking deep into my chest. She handed me half a sandwich from the beachside vendor. I didn't even realize I was hungry until I took a bite. "You're quiet," she said after a while, not in a worried way, just curious. "I think I forgot what it feels like to be still," I answered. Not waiting for a text, not bracing for a fight, not hoping for something that's already over. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Yeah, stillness takes practice." I turned my head to look at her. "When did you get so wise?" She smirked. "Somewhere between heartbreak and tequila." We stayed until the sun softened, until the crowds thinned and the breeze picked up, carrying that sleepy late afternoon calm that makes everything feel suspended. Back at the hotel, I dropped onto the bed, still warm from the day, and realized I hadn't checked my phone once. Not for a text, not for an email, not for her, not for Dana. That hit me harder than anything, because I always checked, even after the fights, even after she moved into the guest room, even after she left the envelope on the counter like it was a polite goodbye. But today, I forgot she existed. Not out of anger, out of peace. Emily came out of the bathroom, towel around her shoulders, damp hair clinging to her neck. She caught me looking but didn't look away. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just this was a good day." She smiled. "You deserve 1,000 more." I nodded, meaning to thank her, but the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. She walked past me to the window and stared out for a moment before adding, almost too softly, "You're different when you're not waiting for her." I didn't ask what she meant. I knew, and it wasn't a criticism. It was a mirror, one I hadn't looked into in a very long time. It came when I least expected it. We'd just come back from an early dinner, a quiet little place tucked behind an old art gallery Emily had spotted walking back from the beach. We were both full, mellow, sun-tired in the best way. I'd kicked off my shoes by the door, tossed my room key on the dresser, and collapsed onto the bed with a soft groan of satisfaction. God, I forgot what it feels like to eat without checking my phone between bites. I mumbled, eyes half closed. "That's because you're healing," Emily called from the bathroom. I could hear the faucet running, the sound of her brushing her teeth in the background. "I'm not sure I'd call it healing. Might just be dehydration." She laughed through the door. "Same thing at this point." I was about to respond when I heard the buzz from the nightstand. A single vibration, then another. I frowned and leaned over. My phone lit up with her name. Dana, wife. Not ex. Not yet. I hadn't changed the label. Hadn't changed anything really. Just filed her under a category somewhere between missing person and ghost. The screen flashed again. Incoming call. I stared at it for a beat too long. Thumb hovering, caught in some space between impulse and dread. My stomach tightened, not from nerves exactly, but from something older. Muscle memory. Trauma. Hope. I answered. "Hey." There was a pause. Then her voice, cool and familiar, like a song I used to love and now couldn't remember the lyrics to. "Hi." I sat up. "Everything okay?" "I was just checking in," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I hadn't heard from you. Just wondering how you're doing." I let the silence stretch between us, not out of cruelty but calculation. She wasn't here for answers, just reassurance that I hadn't moved on faster than she was comfortable with. "I'm fine," I said. Another pause. "You went?" she asked. "Yeah." "To Charleston?" "Yep." "With someone?" I could hear the shift in her voice. That edge of curiosity she tried to smooth over with politeness. But it didn't land like concern. It landed like control. "I didn't think it was the right time," she said after a moment, using the same words she'd left me with. "I didn't mean forever." I didn't respond. My fingers tapped the side of the mattress. My heart was steady, but my patience was on a knife's edge. Emily came out of the bathroom just then, drying her hands on a towel, pausing when she saw me. I met her eyes, and for a moment, neither of us moved. She nodded once, small but certain, and gave me space. No questions, just presence. "I think," I said slowly into the phone, "that you only want me now that I stopped waiting." Dana didn't answer right away. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Her sigh came through the speaker like wind through a cracked window, cool and distant. Are you with someone? I could have lied. I could have said no. I could have thrown out some vague line to keep things neutral, keep her guessing. But I didn't want to lie. And I didn't want to explain, either. She's here, I said. That's what matters. Dana's voice shifted. A trace of something sharper now. So that's it. No, I said. That's finally it. Silence again. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. I didn't think you'd move on so fast. I almost laughed. It wasn't fast, Dana. I was gone long before I left. She didn't argue. Maybe because she knew. Maybe because she didn't have the words. I have to go, I said. Jack. But I hung up before she could finish. And just like that, the loop I'd been trapped in for over a year finally snapped. I let the phone fall onto the bed and exhaled hard, like I'd been holding my breath since the day she walked out. My heart was hammering, but not from guilt. Not from shame. From release. Emily stepped closer, towel draped over her arm, head tilted. You okay? I looked at her. The way she stood there, firm and still and real. Not demanding anything. Not asking for permission. Just here. I nodded. Yeah. Actually, yeah. She sat beside me on the bed, close but not touching, her presence like a balm I didn't know I needed. She asked if I was with someone. I said, staring ahead. What did you say? I turned to her. I said you're here. And that's what matters. She looked down for a second, then back at me. You sure you're not just saying that because you're mad? I shook my head. No. I'm saying that because for the first time, I don't feel like I'm chasing something. Emily nodded, biting her lower lip like she was holding something back. You were never supposed to be the one who got left behind, she said. And then, as if the words were too heavy to hold, she reached for my hand. No drama. No fireworks. Just fingers finding fingers and staying there. And somehow, that touch said more than the call ever could. We didn't talk about the phone call again. After I hung up, it was like something in the room had shifted. Not in a dramatic way. There was no crashing of waves, no sudden confessions. Just a subtle quiet, the kind that settles in once the noise finally stops. Emily didn't ask questions. She didn't press for a post-mortem on what Dana said or how I felt. She just stayed. That's what she always did. She stayed when things got uncomfortable. Stayed when others walked away. And maybe that was why tonight felt so different. We ordered dessert from room service, a slice of key lime pie and 2 forks, and ate it at the little table by the window, the city flickering outside like it had secrets we weren't meant to know. We didn't turn on the TV, didn't reach for our phones. We just sat in the stillness, letting it wrap around us. I think this is the first time in months I don't feel like I'm bracing for something, I said quietly. Emily looked at me, her fork paused midair. Bracing for what? A letdown. A silence. That moment when someone says they just need space, but what they really mean is they're already gone. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she set the fork down, wiped her hands on a napkin, and leaned back in her chair. I used to think love was about holding on, she said. But maybe it's really about who stays when it would have been easier to leave. I didn't say anything to that. I didn't need to. Because she wasn't talking about Dana. She was talking about us. It wasn't something we'd planned. There wasn't some grand moment that threw us together, no sweeping score in the background. Just slow, steady presence. 1,000 small kindnesses accumulating into something neither of us could keep pretending didn't exist. When we finished eating, she stood and walked toward the balcony. The breeze picked up the hem of her shirt, revealing just a hint of skin along her hip before it fell back into place. I followed her without thinking, stepping out into the warm night, the scent of salt and magnolia thick in the air. Beautiful out here, she said. I leaned on the railing beside her. Yeah, you can almost forget the world's messy. She turned to face me, her eyes searching mine. Are you still in love with her? She asked. There it was. No warning. No gentle lead-in. Just the truth. I thought about lying. About softening it. About giving her the answer that would make this easier. But I didn't. No, I said. She looked away, nodding once. Good. Silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was necessary. Then, softly. Because if you were, this would be cruel. I know. Her eyes met mine again. And if you're not, this is something else entirely. I stepped closer. So did she. And when she looked at me this time, it wasn't searching. It was knowing. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, letting my fingers linger just long enough to make the next move inevitable. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She stepped into it. When we kissed, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet, deliberate. The kind of kiss that said, "I see you now. I've always seen you." Her hands found my chest. Mine rested on her hips. And for the first time in what felt like years, there wasn't any guilt trailing behind the touch. Only clarity. We didn't speak as we moved back inside. We didn't need to. We crossed the room together, and I reached behind her, closing the balcony door softly as the curtains fluttered inward. She stopped in front of the bed, and for a moment we both stood there, breathless, suspended between the past and whatever came next. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." I kissed her again, slower this time, both of us tasting the gravity of what we were stepping into. When her shirt came off, she didn't hide. When my hands moved along the curve of her back, I didn't hesitate. There was nothing hurried about it. No urgency, no revenge, just skin and breath and two people who had nothing left to pretend about. When we made love, it wasn't about what we'd lost. It wasn't about filling a space that someone else had left behind. It was about presence. It was about staying. She was warm beneath me, her eyes never closing, her hands never letting go. Every motion was careful and real, like we were writing something with our bodies that neither of us had found the words for yet. Afterward, we didn't move. We lay there in the dim light, tangled in each other, breath steady, skin cooling. Emily traced slow lines on my chest with her fingers. "No regrets?" she asked. I looked at her. Really looked. Her hair was a mess. Her lips were swollen. She had never looked more beautiful to me. "No regrets," I said. And I meant it. Because this, whatever it was, wasn't about who we'd been. It was about who we were becoming. Together. We got back on a Monday. Same driveway. Same door code. Same front steps that had once felt like home. But now, it didn't feel like coming back to anything. More like returning to a version of myself I didn't belong to anymore. The house still smelled faintly of her perfume. Dana's. That sharp floral one she started wearing after year 6 of the marriage. The year she stopped saying, "I love you," without being prompted. The kind of scent that lingered too long, even when she didn't. Emily was quiet beside me as we walked inside. She didn't say she wanted to come. She didn't offer to stay. But when I paused at the door, keys in hand, she just said, "I'll wait." So she did. In the driveway. In her car. With the engine off and her eyes closed, like she knew this was something I had to do alone. The kitchen was exactly how I'd left it. Mostly clean. Still sterile. The envelope from the canceled anniversary trip was gone, probably tossed out during one of her brief visits to grab things she needed. In its place, though, was a single note written in her sharp, all-caps handwriting. "Can we talk? Dinner tonight? D." No punctuation. No apology. No warmth. Just the same performance of effort she used to give when we fought. Never too much, just enough to say she'd tried. I left the note where it was and went upstairs to shower. It was strange, standing under familiar water, drying off with familiar towels, in a house where everything felt like it belonged to someone I used to be. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I wasn't sad, either. I was just done. I met Dana at the restaurant she chose. One of those neutral, upscale places with clean lighting and empty conversation. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the corner in a pale blouse and subtle makeup, like she was trying to rewind the clock. She smiled when she saw me. A soft, rehearsed smile. The kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, standing to hug me. I let her. "You look good," she offered as we sat down. "Thanks." There was a moment, just a beat, where I saw it in her expression. That flicker of recognition. That look that said something's different. And not the haircut or the tan or the relaxed shoulders. It was the absence of waiting. She started talking like it was just another rough patch. Like we'd hit a snag, and this dinner was the first step towards smoothing it all over. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. "About everything. Us." I nodded, not committing. "I think maybe I panicked," she continued. "Back then, when I said I needed space. I didn't mean to make you feel abandoned." "You didn't make me feel anything," I said. "You just left." She looked down. "I know. And I'm sorry. I thought there'd be time." "That's the thing," I said quietly. "You always assumed there'd be time." She didn't answer. She reached for her wine instead, taking a long sip. her eyes flicking up to meet mine over the rim of the glass. "You're different," she said finally. "I don't know what changed, but you seem lighter." I smiled, but not in the way she hoped. "I stopped waiting," I said. She exhaled through her nose, like the truth had landed exactly where she didn't want it to. "Are you seeing someone?" she asked. I didn't flinch. "I'm not looking for permission anymore, Dana." She nodded slowly, lips pressing together. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. Because deep down, she knew. The version of me who would have fought to keep her, who would have begged, reasoned, sacrificed, that man wasn't sitting at this table. He was gone, and someone else had taken his place. Someone who didn't chase ghosts. When dinner ended, we stood outside together in the cool air. She looked up at me like maybe there was still a window open somewhere. A sliver of a chance. But I didn't offer one. "You're really not coming back?" she said, not asking. "No," I replied. "I already did that. What I'm doing now is moving on." She nodded. And just like that, she was the one watching me leave. I walked back to the car, where Emily sat in the passenger seat, flipping through a book she hadn't touched. She looked up when I opened the door. "Hey," she said. "Hey. You good?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." She didn't ask for details. Didn't need to. As I drove us away from the restaurant, I realized something that felt like a full-body exhale. Love isn't who promises forever. It's who actually stays. And Emily? She never asked me to be perfect. Never needed me to pick her. She just showed up, again and again, until I finally saw what was always right in front of me. The one who stayed.